Greetings, I'm Professor Hobo, and welcome to another HOBOTECH News product review. Eons ago, back in the Power Station Cretaceous period of early 2021, I reviewed a 1,000 watt water-resistant suitcase power station by the new brand called MONTEK. The video and the product were both a big hit. The biggest complaint by viewers was that a 1,000 watt inverter just wasn't enough. So we fast forward to the end of 2023 and MONTEK has developed two new products with 2,000 watt inverters and a ton of features that the old one didn't have, including a UPS feature, expandable modular battery support, and get this, 240 volt split phase operation. Yes, but is it any good? Let's find out.
HOBOTECH.
So here it goes. This is not something that I feel comfortable doing, but I'm going to do it for HOBOTECH. As for what's inside the new MONTEKs, they offer two different versions of this product. The first is the X2000, which is a 2072 watt hour NMC battery version rated 1500 cycles to 80%. So what's NMC? NMC is the battery that JACKERY used for many, many years, along with a lot of other power stations. In fact, the original MONTEK used an NMC battery. It's a more energy-dense, lighter weight lithium-ion battery, but it has lower cycles. So that brings us to the second version, which is the X1200. This has a 1,280 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery rated at 2,500 cycles to 80% capacity. As for size and weight, both the X1200 and X2000 are the same size at approximately 20 by 16 by 5 inches, but the heftier X2000 weighs 38.5 pounds, while the lighter X1200 comes in at 34 pounds. As for the display, both units have virtually identical LCD displays which show input and output watts for both AC and DC, time to charge and discharge, battery percentage with icon, as well as other notification icons. As for the inverter inside, both units offer identical 2,000 watt pure sine inverters that sport a less than 10 millisecond UPS feature through three 20 amp outlets. There are 3 ways to charge these products, but since there are 4 total products here, 2 external batteries that go with these 2 power stations, I'm just going to go ahead and put a chart here up on the screen that you can pause and review at your own leisure. So in short, the X2000 can charge from AC power in about 2.5 hours, and it can charge from 850 watts of solar in also in about 2.5 hours. As for the 1200, it can charge from AC power in 1.5 hours and from a whopping 1200 watts of solar in just over an hour. We'll get to those external batteries in a bit. As for 12 volt outputs, MONTEK offers regulated 13.7 volt output through a standard 10 amp cigarette lighter style socket, as well as a pair of 10 amp 5525 barrel plugs. But wait, there's more, because you see, MONTEK is one of the very few offering a 30 amp 12 volt output on all of their products, and that includes the external batteries. Now this is very handy for running high power 12 volt appliances or simply hooking into a fuse box to run the 12 volt in your RV or van build. You can also charge a 12 volt car battery off of this output. Now as for USB outputs, both MONTEK generators and their external batteries offer a plethora of USB outputs. You get a pair of 100 watt USB-C power delivery, a pair of 65 watt USB-C power delivery, and a pair of 24 watt USB-A quick charge ports. Note that none of these products can be recharged by USB. Okay, so first thing you're going to immediately notice is that there are doors hiding all the inputs and outputs on this product, as well as little screw caps over top of all the inputs and outputs. And there's a reason for this. That's because this product is water resistant and it's also dust resistant. The production versions are aiming for IP54 ratings, which means resistant from dust and resistant from water spray in all directions. Currently, it's not rated. This is just a pre-production model. The X1200 and X2000 both do support modular battery expansion through their own B1200 and B2000 batteries. The X1200 supports up to 5 kilowatts of external batteries, and the X2000 up to 8 kilowatt hours of external batteries. And unlike other solar generators, you can access a full configuration screen with no app required, where you can adjust all the behind-the-scenes settings like charge rates and other customizations, but MONTEK did say an app is coming in the near future. As for the warranty, MONTEK offers a 2-year standard warranty on these products, but I was told that one of their stretch goals will be a warranty extension to 3 years. And of course, I took the MONTEK X1200 and X2000 here into my secret laboratory where I performed all kinds of crazy experiments on it. And yes, that means because we have 2 products and we have to do 2 tests each, that it's a quadruple fisted bang, 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 bang battery capacity test. As for the results of the DC battery capacity test, the X2000 scored 2,004 watt hours out of 2,072 for an incredible 97%. Now the X1200 scored 1,039 watt hours out of 1,280 for a much lower 81%. As for the AC battery capacity test results, the X2000 scored an incredible 2,060 out of 2,072 watt hours for an almost impossible to believe 99%. The X1200 scored 1,110 watt hours out of 1,280 for 87%. Now I'm really confused by the much lower result from the X1200 lithium iron phosphate version. While those numbers are still average, it's just not anywhere near the stellar results of the X2000. Next on to the phantom load or parasitic drain test. As for DC consumption, the X1200 used 95 watt hours over 12 hours, or about 190 watt hours over 24 hours. The X2000 used 75 watt hours over 12 hours, or about 150 watt hours over 24 hours. As for AC consumption, the X1200 used 87 watt hours over 4 hours using the inverter, or about 522 watt hours over a 24-hour period. So if you left the inverter on the X1200, it would literally kill the battery in about 2 days. Now as for the X2000, it used a much less 66 watt hours over 4 hours, leaving the inverter on, or 396 watt hours over a 24-hour period. So if you left the inverter on that, it would totally kill the battery in 5 days. That's a really big difference between these 2 products. And again, the lithium iron phosphate version did worse on both the AC and DC results in this test. Now what's even stranger is that the inverter in both of these products is identical, but while they are identical, you can only run the AC inverter with the DC side on at the same time. So with the DC being on at the same time as the AC, this might be the reason why we're seeing consistently worse results with the LFP model. There might be something internally that's slightly different, some kind of piece of hardware or firmware difference that hopefully they'll be able to correct in production. Because the DC idle on this should be the same as the DC idle on this, but it's not. It actually uses 20 watt hours more just sitting at idle. And there should be no reason for that, seeing that pretty much everything in these are identical except for the size of the battery and the solar chargers. So I'm always asked how long stuff's going to run on these products. So I'm going to put a chart up on screen. You can pause to see approximately how long common appliances will run on these units. Now this chart actually does use the X2000 as the base. Inverter capacity test. This is where we determine how hard can we push the inverters in both of these products. Okay, this is the screen of the X2000. You're going to see the wattage here climbing. And here is the sine wave. It is under load at 120 volts, 60 hertz. We will continue to watch that as we increase the load. So we're going to start at 1800 watts. This has a 2000 watt inverter. We will creep it up 200 watts at a time until it dies. Okay, 2000 watts. 2250, 2550, good. Well, it says 3000 watts all of a sudden. I put it up by 200, but it says it's 3000 now. Oh, 3400, it shuts down. I'm going to try this again, and I'm going to try it a little bit slower. 26, 2650, 2750. It just jumps to 3000. That's weird. Let's just see how long it runs on 3000. Just under 5 seconds. So this next test is the sustained cooling or heat soak test. This is where we run it at or above its inverter capacity for at least 5 minutes to see, does it do anything crazy? Does it start smelling funny or smoking or drinking? Or does it forget to bring the bins in after trash night? Now that's misbehaving. So let's see if it does any of those things. Okay, let's try first running it at 2170 watts, which is almost 200 watts over capacity. Let's just see if it will do at least 5 minutes. All right, we're rolling up to 5 minutes at 2170 watts. So far, no problems whatsoever. Now this is running over capacity. You can see it is yellow. So we have been running over capacity and it's doing just fine. So the fans are raging at this point. They are pretty much at maximum speed. So let's see how loud they are. So just a hair under 60 decibels at about a meter away. So this next test is the max charge rate test. This is where we determine how much power can we put into the solar port from 12 to whatever the maximum voltage is that it supports. How many watts is it going to be able to take from solar? So we have a fake solar up here. This is our simulated solar, as I call it. And how fast can it charge from AC power? You can actually go in with certain button presses into the settings and change the charge rate to whatever you want up to 1000 watts. For this video, I'm just going to do 1000 watts charging because I don't think that's too fast. I think that's probably just about right for the life of this battery. You can slow it down if you need to. It will take less power. It'll be quieter. It'll make your batteries last a little bit longer. All right, let's get on with the testing. We're going to start with the X2000, which is on top, and the X1200, which is on the bottom. I'm going to show you how to get into these settings, and then we're going to go ahead and show you the difference in charge rates at 12 volts for the low and high settings, just to show you that you can adjust this to actually charge from a higher rate if you have this on a circuit that has a higher fuse, or if you're charging from a 12-volt battery, you can crank it all the way up and get the fastest charge rate. So the first thing you do to get into the special settings is you turn this thing completely off, make sure nothing's plugged in. You take the grid cord, plug it in, and then the power will just come on automatically. And then when the power comes on automatically, you hold down the AC inverter button for about 12 seconds, and then a new screen will come up. This is how you get into these special settings. It beeps, then you see this new screen come up, so let's take a closer look at it. To scroll down this list, you hold the button down a few seconds, and it takes you down to the next thing in the list. And in order to change what's in the list, you just quick press. So you can see I'm changing the brightness of the LCD. So AC and DC auto off, that's pretty self-explanatory. It will automatically turn off the AC or DC after a set period of time. Then you can set the AC frequency to 50 or 60, LCD brightness 0 to 100. Low power reminder. You can set this to a low percentage between a 1 and 10, and it will beep and let you know, hey, you're running out of power, which is a nice feature. I really like to be able to turn that on, maybe at 1% to let me know my stuff's about to die. Car input max, this is what we're talking about here. So you have the option to go all the way from 8 to 13 amps. So we'll go ahead and test that right now. Let this thing go back to its default screen. That saves the settings automatically, and then we can just go ahead and test immediately if it will do 13 amps. All right, I already have this set for 13 volts. Let's see if it takes 13 amps. It should, and there it is. 12.6 rounded up is, of course, 13. It allows you to charge at just over 150 watts. Now, let's see how far it'll let you go. So, okay, so anything above 15 volts, it will immediately let you go up to 20 amps. So even at 14 volts here, it still locks you at 13 amps for 170 watts of charging. So if you have a running vehicle at 14.4 volts, you can charge this thing as fast as 170 watts, assuming that you have a fuse that can allow you to run 13 amps, or you can connect it directly to your battery. So let's do the same thing. Let's crank this back. Let's go ahead back into these settings and tell it we want to do 8 amps of charging. Okay, we just set this to 8 amps car charging. Let's turn the car charging back on, and it should now limit to around 8 amps. Gotta stay awake somehow through all this. There we go, 8 amps. So there you have it. That setting will allow you to change the 12-volt charging rate from 8 to 13 amps. Now, if you have a vehicle that has a 10-amp fuse, you want to obviously keep it under 10 amps, like 8 or 9 will be good. If you want to charge directly from another 12-volt battery, set it to 13. If you have a 15-amp fuse in your vehicle, then set it to 13. Okay, so the next is AC charging rate, and that allows you to pick from 0 to 100 in 10% increments. What this does is it actually changes the rate of AC charging, so you can charge from 100 watts to 1,000 watts. Charge end. Now this allows you to go from 90 to 100%, and you can choose if you want the battery to stop charging at 90%. So if you want to extend the life of the battery to its maximum, set charge end to 90. And then on this next, discharge end, same thing, but for the lower end of the battery. So when you're going to discharge the battery, you can leave 10%, out to 10%. So it'll discharge, if this setting's here, it'll discharge down to 10% and recharge to 90%. So it'll keep the battery between 10 and 90%, literally doubling the lifespan of your product. So AC always on, I said this set to never, and DC always on is always set to never. So what this setting means is if you have the unit connected to a DC power source, such as solar, when the battery capacity is over this percentage, then the AC power button will be turned on automatically. So say that you run your MONTEK all the way dead and you have it set to 10%. So when the power comes back on, it'll charge the MONTEK back up to 10% battery, then turn the AC inverter on. This is a feature that a lot of people really want. So if you're using this to run an off-grid cabins, routers or modems or something like that, it'll automatically turn itself back on after a set percentage. So DC does the same thing. It'll turn the DC circuitry on after either 10% or all the way up to 100% or never, depending on what you have that set to. So this next setting is PVAC priority, and what this means is if you set this to, say, 5%, what it'll do is if the battery is charged more than 5%, it'll only allow you to charge with solar, even if AC is plugged in. So you could set this all the way up to 100%, saying, okay, I want AC power to charge this all the time. Or if you set it to, say, 30%, it will charge from AC power up to 30%, and then above 30%, it will only charge with solar. So this allows you to set how it's going to charge from either solar or grid, and possibly save you money depending on how you're going to use this. Now, these next two are obvious. Temperature, you can set the Fahrenheit or Celsius, and then buzzer on or off, which is the beep that you're hearing. You can turn that on or off. And those are all the settings. Okay, so let's move on to 24-volt charging and see what this does with a 24-volt vehicle or a higher-end solar panel. There we go, 24 volts. We'll see what it pulls amps-wise. Remember, this can do 20 amps, and the MONTEK has a 20 amp limit on the input, which is very high for a solar generator. Okay, it's pulling maximum amps from my charger at 24 volts. So at 24 volts, it'll charge at 422 watts. That means you can have a 400-watt solar panel that's 24 volts, and this thing will take it and ask for more. That's pretty crazy. So that's actually good. That means you can put multiple solar panels in parallel and series to max this thing out very easily. So let's take it to 36 volts. We're charging at 645 watts. That is impressive. All right, let's take it up. 48 volts. And it charges at 865 watts. According to the specs I got from MONTEK for the NMC version, which is the X2000, 12 to a whopping 150 volts on the MPPT controller, 20 amps, up to 850 watts. So this thing can take a serious amount of voltage and a pretty serious amount of amps. So let's see how quickly we can max out that 850 watts of solar, and can we take it beyond that? Okay, so all that noise you're hearing is my charger. It is not the MONTEK. All right, so we should be pretty much already at the maximum for this. Let's see. I can take it all the way up to 150 volts. That's gonna be kind of nuts. Okay, 152 volts, 5.6 amps, still doing 865 watts. Okay, at 153, it says high, and it overloads the MONTEK with a warning beep. It does warning beep you, which is nice. What happens if I go too high? I don't want to push it any higher than 160, but it's going to beep like crazy and tell you that you're way over voltage. So that's some pretty impressive stuff. I mean, we're able to do 150 volts plus, and then if you go over, it beeps loudly. If you have this thing outside, you're gonna hear it beeping like crazy if you overvolt it. But 150 volts is more than enough to charge at 850 watts. I mean, that gives you pretty much unlimited playground when it comes to solar panels. You can use a bunch of 100 watters, you can use a bunch of 50 watters. You can use 400 watt, 500 watt panels on this. All these different configurations. You can put them 2 in parallel, or 2 in series, or 4 in series parallel. Whatever it takes to get to that 850 watt limit. So this is an over paneler's dream. If you love to over panel your solar generator, which means to put way more solar into it than it's supposed to take, and that works really good for cloudy days and bad weather. Clouds roll over. If you have like 1,500 watts of solar plugged into this, it's only going to take 850. You're not going to hurt it by putting more solar in. It'll just alarm at the voltage or cut off at the amps. So as long as you don't over voltage it more than 150 volts, you can put as many panels on this as you want. And at 1,500 watts, even on a cloudy day, you're going to get probably 400 or 500 watts out of that array. So even in a wintertime, if the panels are pointing up in the straight up and the sun's over there, that's one of the big reasons to over panel is wintertime. So if you have your panels just facing straight up and the sun's way over there, you're going to get that really strong angle of reflection off those panels. They're only going to output half or less what they're rated for. So again, over paneler's dream. Good job, MONTEK. I really like to see these strong MPPT controllers. All right, next is the X1200. This is the LFP version. So a much smaller battery, but it takes a lot more solar, 1,200 watts from 12 to 150 volts with 20 amps. So this takes like 50% more solar. So this thing can charge with a 1,280 watt hour battery at 1,200 watts of solar in like an hour under perfect conditions. That's super fast. I'm trying to think if there's any other solar generator out there that fully charges in 1 hour with solar. Most of them are like 90 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I'll have to look, but this might be the fastest solar generator charging by solar that I've had on the channel, or it's very close. I might have had like 1.2, 1.3, or 1.4 hours. So let's see what the real limit is, because it says 1,200 on paper. Let's see what the MONTEK can actually do. See if we can squeeze a little extra out of it. What's kind of nice is it does actually tell you down here on the screen what voltage your solar array is. Very rare do you actually see the incoming voltage of the solar on the main screen. Like usually it's on a hidden screen. At 48 volts, 20 amps, we got 875 watts. We're going to hit a magic combination of voltage and amps. It's going to give us 1,200 watts. We're getting close. So 60 volts, 20 amps, we're just hitting just under 1,100 watts. So at 72 volts, the amps, if you notice, are finally starting to tick down a little bit, and we are now maxed at 1,243 watts. So you can get a little extra wattage in there. So it's closer to 1,250 watt maximum than 1,200, which is about the same as the other one. So this one also has the same 150 volt limit. So we're just going to go see 100 volts. It's the same, 1,200. I don't expect it's going to charge any faster if we go higher. It's just going to lower the amps. 1,250 watts, no change. Just make sure that the overload protection on this works, the over voltage protection. And at 153 volts, just like the other one, we get the warning. So we're going to go ahead and turn this back down to a safe voltage and unhook it for our next test. Okay, charging at 1,000 watts. I've let it charge here for several minutes so that the fan noise balances out. Let's see how loud it is from a meter away. 43, 44 decibels, that is whisper quiet. This thing barely makes any noise while it's charging from the wall at a 1,000 watt rate. Now when charging from Max Solar, the fans are definitely louder. Let's see how much louder. So 55, 56 decibels when charging at the max solar rate on either MONTEK. Okay, so what about simultaneous charging when charging from both an AC and DC source at the same time? Double your pleasure, double your fun, double your charge rate. You can see here it says 840 watts from DC or solar and 1,000 watts from AC grid power for a total of about 1900 watts. And you can see it actually adjusted the input minutes to 33. So let me unplug grid. You'll see immediately the input minutes change and now go to 66 minutes. So it pretty much doubled the time. So by doing grid and solar charging simultaneously, you half that time. There you go. 33 minutes from 66. Literally cut your time in half. So if you're in a major hurry to charge your MONTEK, you can plug in a charger like I have into the solar port, or just put 1,000 watts of solar on it and double your charging speed. So in the X2000, which has a 2,000 watt hour battery at 1,800 watts, it's going to charge in just over an hour from dead to full at this double rate. So that's pretty darn fast. Okay, now on the X1200, simultaneous charging acts completely differently. On this model, the X2000, which has the larger battery, you can max out the solar and max out the AC charging. On the X1200, which is the lithium iron phosphate version with a much smaller 1,200 watt hour battery, you'll see there's a limitation. It's only taking 220 watts or so from solar and another 1,000 from AC. So it's limiting itself to 1,200 watts. And that's not solar priority. It's actually AC priority. It's taking the 1,000 watts from AC no matter what. Now, if I unplug AC, you'll see that it immediately maxes out at 1,200 watts of solar. So that's funny that the lithium iron phosphate version will take a massive 1,200 watts of solar, but it won't simultaneous charge any faster than 1,200 watts, no matter what the combined source. So you can see right here, I plug AC power back in, it immediately down tunes the solar coming in to about 230 watts or so. So very interesting difference between the two models. Both MONTEKs do include a rudimentary UPS or uninterruptible power supply feature, which allows you to plug your electronics, computers, modems, routers, whatever, into the AC inverter and run them during a blackout situation. So what I'm simulating here on this super old 16-year-old laptop with no battery in it that somehow still plays YouTube videos. I didn't think this would ever play YouTube. This is like Windows XP. So, but it's playing at 144p, kind of stuttery, but it is playing. So it's running under maximum load right now. That CPU is pegged. So what I have now is I have wall power going into this box, which then goes into the MONTEK, goes through to the inverter, comes out, powers a laptop. So we're going to simulate a thunderstorm blackout condition where the power goes out. Is the laptop running your videos or whatever other important stuff going to continue to run? Now, note that this does not have a battery in it, so it's not going to keep staying on no matter what I do. So place your bets. Is the computer going to stay on or is it going to go out? Ready? 3, 2, 1. It's still going. It's still playing the video, so it passes the test there. Now I'm going to have to switch this over and make sure the other one passes, because this was the X2000. So we're going to go down to the X1200 and see if that one passes as well. And just to prove to you that it is plugged in, I will go ahead and pull the cable out. And this is going to suck because I'm going to have to pull that all back up over again. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and run the laptop in basic desktop mode. We do have this charging. It's at 57% battery. It's charging at 1,000 watts. It's sending about 40 into the laptop. Let's see. Is it going to stay on? It should. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so just like we expected, just like the X2000, the X1200 UPS feature does keep the laptop running without a battery, even during a blackout situation. Musician's favorite, amp interference test. This is where we determine, does the inverter in the MONTEK output clean enough power to run a power amp without making buzzy, clicky, poppy noises come out of the speakers? A poor inverter will make noise. A good inverter will not. So we're going to find out right now, is it clean or is it dirty? So I have the inverter coming out into the switch box and switch box going to the amp. So as soon as I turn the power on, we're going to find out. All right, place your bets. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so unfortunately, it does make a buzzing noise through the inverter when running a power amp. Let's just check the other inverter just in case, but yeah, as expected, it's exactly the same. So no one in a band or wants to hear this in a PA system, or definitely not headphones on a ham radio. So this isn't really the product for you if you're going to be powering a power amp, ham radio system, or playing in a band and using this to power your equipment. Both MONTEK X1200 and X2000 offer a whopping 4 USB-C power delivery ports each, 2 65 watters and 2 100 watters. Let's test those out real quick. You can see right here, I'm already pulling 213 watts out of the 2 100 watt USB ports. If you can see it, but it's right there, 213. Roll this around and show you that it's charging at 92 there and 95 there. And that's out of the 2 100 watt power delivery ports. So switch this to the 65s. First time ever on the channel, I had 4 USB-C ports to test. This one is pulling 58 and 61 for a total of 136. So there you have it. All the USB ports function as they're supposed to. We can simultaneously pull several hundred watts. That means you can run 2 full-size MacBook Pros and then charge your USB-C phones, 2 of them at the same time. And then you have 2 USB-A quick charge ports on top of that. So you can pull a ton of power out of here. And you also have 5525 outputs that can pull 10 amps. So you got your cigarette lighter, it does 10 amps, your 2 5525s that pull 10 amps. And then you got this. This is the big daddy. This is what all the van builds and RVers who want to run their MONTEK into their fuse box. We got these 12 volt, 30 amp outputs. So I'm going to test that next. I'm using this 300 watt Pure Sine Bestech, which I will have a link on my Amazon page if you're interested. This is a nice little tiny size to run your Starlink or whatever in your RV off your batteries without running your main inverter. And this comes with a cigarette lighter plug and battery clamps. So I have it running down to this tiny little heater. And I just went ahead and turned it on. You can see it's pulling 360 watts. 355 watts is varying slightly, but it is handling 30 amps at 12 volts, no problem.
Day 2.
All right, next on the agenda, because it seems like these features never end on this thing. This thing has so many features. 240 volt operation. Yes, you can actually hook up 2 MONTEKs. Now, unlike a lot of other products, this, even though it's 2 different model numbers with 2 different size batteries, the inverters are identical. These are both 2000 watt inverters. They're exactly the same. So you can mix and match models. You can have one X1200 and one X2000 combined together to make 240 volts. And that's exactly what this little box does right here. It has a 4-prong twist lock and a little green light that lets you know everything is synced up. Now all you have to do is hook this cable up, turn on both inverters, and it's 240 volts. There's no settings in here. There's no switches you got to flip. It's an instant 240, which is really nice. Now here's something, again, that's unique about this product. You can have 240 volt split phase and 120 volt single phase at the same time. So you got your outlets built into the inverter on both units. Those are still doing 120 volt 60 hertz, and this is doing 240 volt 60 hertz. So you can have both at the same time, and that's super cool. Okay, here's something you really don't get from the competition. We're in 240 volt split phase mode. You can see the green light on here. You can see that it's not blinking, that it is in phase right now. So we're doing 240 volts. Now I have 120 from the grid. I'm gonna go ahead and plug it into just one of the MONTEKs, not both, just one. Say I wanna charge one for some reason. Here's what happens. You'll hear a relay click and the battery will start to charge. So we're charging this bottom battery. But now you can see the green light's blinking. That means this is no longer 240 volts. What it does, it shuts off one of the sides to allow you to charge. So you can't charge from 120 and have 240 volts come out at the same time. All right, now for 240 volt testing. Since we got this working, we're gonna go ahead and put it in 240 volt mode. I'm gonna show it to you on the oscilloscope first. Then we're going to actually plug in a 240 volt appliance and see if it pulls evenly from both, how it works out. And there you have it, 240 volts at 60 hertz, perfect sine wave. So now that this thing is synced, let's go ahead and plug in my 240 volt appliance that's in the next room. If you guys are interested in what I am running in the next room, watch my previous video on the Endure Energy ESP5100. I actually needed to hook up a 240 volt appliance. So I says, hey, I have to do a 240 volt test. So now I'm going to go ahead and run that in the next room. We'll come back and see what the meters say. And this is actually what we're running over here in this other room. This is a 240 volt inverter charger that's charging this Endure battery. This battery's almost full, so it is slowing down. It's 37 amps. So top number 1140, bottom number 1150. It's almost perfectly evenly from the two MONTEKs. I have to say that was a very successful 240 volt load test. So these two tiny little MONTEK solar generators through the combiner box had no problems running a 240 volt inverter charger that was charging a battery of 50 amps. Double thumbs up for MONTEK coming up with a nice, easy to use 240 volt solution for those of you that need split phase power in your homes. And this is going to work for those well pumps, those washer dryers, those big ovens, and whatever other 240 volt appliances you need to run when the power goes out. Last but not least, the MONTEK X1200 and X2000 both have their own expandable batteries. So we're looking at the X2000 right now, which is their NMC product. And you can obviously see there's a size difference between its external battery and the solar generator. So the external battery for both units is going to be smaller than the main unit. And I'm not really sure why they made the battery case smaller. I would think they'd just make it the same size, but you can see here I have the battery cable hooked up between the two units. So yes, this is the only configuration. The cable's going to stick out this far. It does allow you to hook this up with them sitting on their backs. So you can actually flip these over on their backs. So the spine of the suitcase is on the floor, and you have these flaps open to let the air go through, and then you'd have this cable coming up and over. So, and it does allow you to spread them apart a little bit. Now you can take this battery and set it up right this way, but you would be blocking the vent. However, there is a second battery port back here. It says external battery number 2. So you have a battery port 1 and a battery port 2. You can, in fact, hook this battery up to battery port 2 if you want to. So if you don't want the cable coming out the front like this, you can have the battery cable going off to the side. When it comes to hooking these up, there's nothing special, okay? What I mean by that is when you hook this battery to their solar generator, all it does is it transfers power from this battery to this battery. It doesn't recalculate on the screen, so as you're hooking this up, it doesn't say all of a sudden that you get a different percentage. The percentage stays the same, but what happens is it transfers power from this to this if this one's charged more. If this one's charged more, it'll send power from this one to this one. So essentially what it's trying to do is balance these two batteries. Both these batteries are the same size and same voltage. So you can hook them up if this one is like 5% and this one's 100%, it's fine, because what it'll do is it'll just transfer power from the 100% to the 5% until they're both around 50%. So that's how this works. And charging one does not charge the other. So if I plug in the AC power cable to the battery, you would think, okay, possibly that power is transmitted high speed through this cable to the other battery, but that's not the case. What actually happens is that the internal charger in here, which you heard just kick on, and then that battery will send the power through DC to this battery. So there is no high speed transfer between these two batteries. It's going to be at the speed of whatever the battery transfer rate's going to be. Now all the outputs on the side are exactly the same as the solar generator. There's no cigarette lighter socket on the battery, unfortunately. It does have on that side the AC charger, which you see I plugged in. So the battery will charge at a maximum of 600 watts from AC power, and this is not configurable. There is no special setting you can go into on the battery to change the charging speed. It's fixed at 600 watts. Now, the solar input, which is on the front, just the same as on the main solar generator, this takes a whopping 850 watts of solar from 12 to 150 volts, just like its big brother, and that's also at 20 amps. So you can actually solar charge both of these at the same time at 850 watts. That's a lot of solar for these two little batteries. The batteries in all the MONTEKs coming out do stop charging below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. I'm going to go ahead and test that next just to make sure that that works.
Day 3.
So I put this battery in my deep freezer overnight, so to make sure it got nice and cold in there. And there's definitely a bug. There's an anomaly here on the screen. It says 123 degrees Fahrenheit. I think they got something a little wrong in there when it comes to the display of the temperature. But you can see from here, so just to prove to you, I did put it in my freezer. Let's look at the temperature. You can see there it says 23 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 degrees. You can see it says 132 degrees. It seems like the temperature keeps going up as it's sitting here, which is kind of weird, but 136. Okay, well, they got something goofy in there, but we're going to test and see, does it charge? It's because it shouldn't charge at all. Let's go ahead and stick this in. I hear it buzzing like it would be charging, but it is not. There is no power coming in, so that passes. Okay, so now I have the simulated solar at 48 volts. Let's see if that will take anything. It says it's inputting 5 watts. It's funny, that temperature is going sky high, 150 degrees. This test passed. It does actually prevent charging when it's below freezing. I'm gonna have to tell MONTEK about this, take a screenshot, let them know that this is, temperature's going up. There's definitely some kind of calibration issue here. All right, this is what the X2000 looks like. Now the X1200 is pretty much identical inside, just some slight changes, so I'm not gonna show them both. Now, I took this heat shield off, which covers all this. So this heat shield comes out with a bunch of screws that are hard to get to. This section here is the inverter. Inside there where those little silver capacitors are, that's the BMS for the battery. Down there is the charging circuit. And then this up here is the 24 volt output. So it sends 24 volts over to this board. This board actually does the USB. So it takes 24 volts, converts it to 12. Everything is very nicely wrapped. Everything is zip tied. There's no crazy soldering. There's no too small wires. I mean, this is good. 6 gauge cabling going to the inverter. This here's 10 gauge cabling. Everything is in order. All the colors line up. Everything's glued in where it needs to be glued in. Over here, these are the outlets. And there is a real ground. You can see this green wire. It actually goes to the AC out, and if you follow the green wire to the AC input. So you might be wondering what's in here. All it is, it's just the battery cells. So the battery cells are encased by this aluminum shell. There's way too many screws. There's like 20 screws to get it out. There's no point in taking it out because we know what's under there. All right, so there's one last test for the MONTEK. It doesn't have an official IP rating, but MONTEK tells me they're going to shoot for IP54, which means it won't get dust in it and it can take water sprays from any direction. It doesn't mean it's going to be able to be submerged. However, I did this with the original MONTEK several years ago and it passed no problem. Pretty much the same type of case. I do have this all buttoned up. I do have the power turned off. This is the NMC battery version. So don't do this at home. This is extremely dangerous. This is a saltwater hot tub, so this could go bad very quickly. I do have a fire extinguisher inside. I could throw this out in my driveway if it starts to fizzle. So we're gonna go ahead and dunk this in my hot tub and see exactly what happens to it. So we'll give it a 2-second dunk, and then we'll check out the inside and see if there's any water intrusion. So here it goes. This is not something that I feel comfortable doing, but I'm gonna do it for HOBOTECH. Oh geez. Okay, there's the 2-second dunk in the saltwater hot tub. I'm going to go ahead and take it apart and we'll see if any water got inside. Now because the MONTEK is covered in salt water, I'm going to hose it off real quick before we take it in the lab. And there, that covers the spray from multiple directions. Okay, on first inspection, there is no water intrusion inside. There's a little bit of water here at the bottom, but that is outside of the seal. This white gasket is the seal. There was a little bit of water on the outside as expected. Everything in here is bone dry. So let's rotate and check the other door. This is all bone dry. There's no water intrusion. just water here at the bottom of the door that is outside of the seal. And here are the results. There's absolutely no water intrusion whatsoever inside of the case. Now there's a little bit of water on the seal. That's just because of the way I took it apart. Some water got on the seal, but everything is bone dry. So that tells me this is at least IP54 water resistant, so you can take it out in the weather no problem. So what do I think about the X1200 and X2000 by MONTEK? So even though these are pre-production models with a handful of bugs, it seems MONTEK has really knocked it out of the park with this pair of offerings. With exception of failing the amp interference test, which is really a minor issue at best for most customers, it does everything quite well. I'm especially pleased with how simple and quick it is to set up two MONTEKs for split-phase 240-volt operation. Standard AC charging isn't the fastest, especially on the larger X2000, but that can be circumvented by hooking up a power supply to the solar input. Then it charges just about as fast as its smaller sibling, the X1200. This brings me to a baffling question about the X1200 with its lithium iron phosphate battery. Why does it do so much poorly on the capacity and idle consumption tests? Is this a bug, a difference in hardware, difference in firmware? I mean, the inverters perform exactly the same, so it has to be something else. This forces me to say that if I had to choose between one of these two models, I'd easily take the X2000, even though it has a shorter lifespan battery by 1,000 cycles. I'm really not a person that cycles a power station every day like somebody who might live off the grid. I'm also not in a hurry to charge by solar most of the time, so I'm fine with the X2000's slower 850 watt solar limit. Now, if you plan to cycle daily and you want that 1,200 watt solar charge ability, then you're probably going to want to go with the cheaper, longer lasting X1200. And if you simply need more battery, just get the expandable B1200 battery for it. For everyone else though, I'm going to suggest get the larger X2000, enjoy the higher efficiency and runtime for a similar size and weight. It's actually worth a few dollars more to get the bigger model, I think. Now what I don't like about the models is really somewhat minor. Setting aside the shortcomings of the X1200 and handful of bugs I've encountered, I think the X2000 AC charging should certainly be a little bit faster. I'm sure it's because they both use the identical 1,200 watt inverter 1,000 watt charger combo. I question why the solar charging on the X2000 is only 850 watts when the X1200 supports 1,200 watts. Maybe that's a limitation of the NMC battery they use, I don't know. I was also bummed that the app hasn't been developed yet, so I couldn't even try it out. I also wish that when you hooked up the external battery, it would recalculate the totals on the screen so that you could see updated runtime like the major competitors do. However, even Jackery, as big as they are, can't seem to get that right, so I'm not going to be too hard on MONTEK about that because they are the new kid on the block. We've all come to realize over the past several years on HOBOTECH, there just simply is no such thing as the perfect power station. There's always going to be something wrong with all of them. Now here's the best part, product price. These two MONTEK Sogens are launching on Indiegogo today. That means for a very limited time, and when I say very limited, I mean very limited, you can score one of these bad boys for a super early bird price that's likely never to be seen again. For the X1200 lithium iron phosphate version, the price is only $849. That's 66 cents per watt hour. That is really cheap. For the X2000, it gets even better. This is the NMC version. The price is only $9.99. That's a ridiculous 48 cents per watt hour. Yes, 48 cents per watt hour for one of these state-of-the-art power stations that doubled up can do 240 volts. So you can get two of them, double them up, have twice the power, or get the external batteries. This price is impossible to beat by any other major brand. Now, for those of you who don't understand how crowdfunding works, the first ones to pre-order get the best price. The price is only good for the first few hundred sold. After that, the price goes up just a little bit more. Rinse and repeat over time until the campaign ends and you're basically paying maximum price. So the longer you wait to get in on the MONTEK bandwagon, the more you're going to pay. MONTEK did launch their previous product on Indiegogo 2.5 years ago, and they did deliver as promised to very many happy customers. Most people really love their MONTEKs, and they really are excited about these two new products. The folks on my Facebook group, the HOBOTECH crew, are going nuts over this product. They have been begging me since the day it fell into my lap on my Patreon page. They're like, we need to see this right away. You got to review it immediately. We got to have it. So people were flipping out and going nuts over this. If you're interested in this product, I'd jump on it right away before the price goes up. That's all I'm saying. And if you're worried that MONTEK being on Indiegogo is just going to take your money and take off, it's extremely unlikely. The fact is they already had a successful campaign, a very successful campaign, and all of their customers got their products. So MONTEK's motto is even, they don't want to be the biggest solar generator company, they just want to be the best. So they do have some of the best customer support you're ever going to find for a product like this. Now, who's this product aimed at? These are obviously portable power stations, and the fact they are water and weather resistant would say they are meant for outdoor use. So the primary use would be for camping, overlanding, running power to job site, powering refrigerators in your vehicle, remote power for a building or workshop, or other adventures. However, the MONTEK can also pull double duty around the house and provide both 120 and 240 volt split power during blackout scenarios. So with one or two of their add-on batteries, you can easily have enough power to run a refrigerator and a deep freezer simultaneously during an outage, run a window air conditioner or a small space heater, and keep your microwave, TV, satellite going to keep yourself entertained during a blackout. It's a pretty well-rounded offering. Paired together, you can even power your 240 volt well pump in a pinch or a small electric water heater for a hot shower. Remember that you can mix and match these two together because they have the same inverter. So for 240 volt operation, you can have one X1200, one X2000, two X1200s, or two X2000s. Now you can mix them any way you want. You can still get 240 volts out of them. So for those of you that remember my original review of the original MONTEK 1000 over 2 years ago, that product actually had a flip-up lid that would hold a solar panel inside, but the problem is it can only hold an 80-watt panel. So MONTEK decided to skip that whole thing and not even try to have a solar panel included. You're kind of on your own for the solar panels. But MONTEK does offer their own panels as part of an add-on package when you purchase one of these from your campaign page. So basically, if you want one of their solar panels, you put this in your cart, then you add the solar panel before you check out. However, you can use really whatever solar panels you like, since the solar voltage range is incredible on this, from 12 to 150 volts up to 20 amps. So you could pretty much just go hog wild and do either series panels or series parallel configurations. You can use 400 and 500 watt residential panels. You can pretty much do whatever you want. These things are pretty much going to take it as long as you keep it under that 150 volt total. Of course, I'm going to recommend the panels I just reviewed, the 200 watt Bouge RV Yuma SIGs, because they're super shade tolerant and virtually indestructible. So go ahead and check out that review if you haven't seen it yet. So if you're interested in the new MONTEK X1200 or X2000 solar generators, the link is going to be in the description of this video below. I'm also going to put a link here at the bottom of the screen, along with a QR code that you can scan on a mobile device if you're watching me on TV. It'll take you on over to MONTEK's Indiegogo page, where you can check out their new MONTEK solar generators. Thanks for watching. If you learned something today, don't forget to give me that thumbs up below. And if you're not a subscriber already, you know what to do. That's it for now. Till next time.
Odin commands you to like and subscribe, and clean my litter box.